the semester graduation pieces. My name's Tracy Collum. I'm the Associate Dean of the Graduate School at Idaho State University. And for NAGAP, I help organize and moderate many of our webinars. So if you have topics that you would love to hear about, if you have a topic you would love to present, I would love to hear from you so that way we can get you on our schedule to present to our NAGAP membership. All of our webinars are recorded and put on our website behind the membership wall, unless they are sponsored. And today we have a sponsored webinar, so we'll be able to send that out to non-members as well. So a few housekeeping things to just brush up on. With today's webinar, this is November 30th. Our next one is going to be on Tuesday, December 14th. And that webinar will be a conglomeration of NAGAP members discussing COVID next steps, how to kind of proceed on where we've been and moving forward with some of the best practices, as well as new ideas that have emerged over the last year and a half that maybe people want to continue doing, even as we kind of emerge out of this pandemic that we've been working in. So make sure you RSVP and sign up for the December 14th webinar. You can get that recording too, if that's a busy week for you. And then another thing to keep an eye on is pay attention to your emails for when registration opens for the spring annual conference, the GEM Summit that we have, and it'll be in Chicago this year. And the registration fees are already on the website, so start planning your budgets and asking your budget folks for permission and all those great things so that way you can join us in Chicago. So take a look at the website for that as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and let you know that if you have questions throughout the webinar, make sure you throw them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And our folks will be able to respond to those as they get those questions in. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Duolingo, and Lindsay, I believe, Lindsay Addington is going to start us off. And if you have questions, make sure you throw them down there so all of our Duolingo folks can respond to those. So Lindsay, thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to NAGAP for having us today. This is our second webinar over the last year, and also excited to participate in your GEM Summit in Chicago in the spring. I joined Duolingo this summer to help support Ryan in our graduate engagement efforts, and excited to be here with two of our universities as we share kind of our evolving story of a digital first English test, but which wouldn't be complete without the perspective of test takers who are growing, and about half of whom are interested in pursuing study at the graduate level. And of course, hearing from our institutional partners about their use and utilization of the test. So today we are going to start with just brief introductions. We will go into an overview of the Duolingo English test with insights from our test taker data. We'll share how we work with institutions, and then move to the heart of the presentation, which is hearing from Stevie and Lisa about their experience with the test. And we'll probably have about 5 to 10 minutes at the end to answer questions. But as Tracy shared, feel free to pop those in the chat or the Q&A if you have questions throughout the presentation. So I will kick things over to Ryan to begin with some introductions.
Thanks, Lindsay. And as Lindsay had mentioned, some of you may remember the webinar that we did this past spring with me. Lindsay has joined the graduate team as we continue to grow and have more success within the graduate field. So excited to talk to you more. And I've been at Duolingo for a little over 5 years now and managed schools such as ASU. So I'm going to pass this off over to Lisa.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Faulkner. I'm the Director of Graduate and Transfer Recruitment with Arizona State University. So basically, in short, that means that any of the recruitment efforts for international students and domestic students who are looking at grad school or looking at transferring to ASU will work through my team in admission services. And Stevie?
Lisa. Hi, I'm Stevie Otto. I am the Director of Graduate Recruitment and Admissions for the Moody School of Graduate and Advanced Studies at SMU in Dallas, Texas. And I primarily work with PhD recruitment, but I do assist with the admissions processes for our Dedman College of Humanities and Sciences as well.
Great. Thank you both for being here today. And we'll move into just a brief overview of the Duolingo English Test. So where did we begin and what do we aim and aspire to do? The Duolingo English Test aims to use technology to increase access to opportunities for English language learners. And for many of those opportunities exist within higher education. So the Duolingo English Test, which is just over 5 years old, grew from the interest of English language learners who were using our Duolingo language app, which began in around 2012. And they wanted to prove their English proficiency. Our founders, both of whom were international students themselves, experienced barriers to accessing English proficiency testing when they were applying and saw a need for change. So in designing the Duolingo English Test, the engineers, researchers, language learning specialists, and assessment experts wanted to design a test that really overcame the limitations of geography, of time, of cost that is traditionally associated with a physical test center model. And as this map depicts, there is not only a scarcity of test centers for international students, they are not evenly distributed across countries. And oftentimes you'll find test centers densely located in English-speaking countries. So the Duolingo English Test, thanks to broader internet access, which is an at-home, on-demand, internet-based test, really makes access to testing easier. We are serving students in countries where test center per capita is low. So think China, Korea, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, India, Kazakhstan, and are able to serve these students through our accessible testing. So what we have is a truly on-demand test with excellent support for all users. That includes test takers and institutions, and the ability to innovate and evolve alongside technology and how technology advances. So a few characteristics that set the Duolingo English Test apart we've already discussed its accessibility. We've had test takers in more than 200 countries, and the test is taken for $49 US. We are a comprehensive exam. So we include an overall English proficiency score and subscores to give test takers and institutions greater insight into the different components of language. We also have a video interview and writing sample. It is a fast test. It is certified within 48 hours, which gives test takers and institutions abilities to make decisions about their academic options, as well as who kind of through the evaluation process allows you to make decisions in a timely manner, and all while remaining a highly reliable exam. So our research supports the use in high stakes admission testing and strongly correlates with IELTS and TOEFL tests, traditional exams that have been used for decades within the admission landscape. And we are a secure exam, giving you trust that these results are certified and valid through remote proctoring and artificial intelligence, through a browser lockdown and a computer adaptive test with a large test item bank. All of these components go into making a very secure and reliable exam. So because of these qualities, which were particularly essential during the pandemic, we saw tremendous growth. In 2020, we had more than 2,000 new institutions or programs join to accepting the Duolingo English Test, and we saw a 2,000% increase in test volume. So today we sit at about 3,500 institutions and programs, and this is growing daily. So because of this safer and more accessible test, it's unlikely that students will want to go back to the status quo, because assessment technology has really proven that a high stakes digital test is possible. So let's dive a little bit deeper into who our test takers are and your prospective students. So we know through a snapshot of our test taker data that about half of our test takers are interested in pursuing graduate level education. And this does fluctuate throughout the academic and admission cycle depending on deadlines. But in September through October, we saw about 41% of our test takers were interested in graduate study and about 40% were interested in undergraduate study. And our data also show strong alignment with what we know about international enrollment trends. They align very closely with respect to field of study. We know that our test takers are primarily interested in STEM and business and management fields. In addition to quantitative data, we also gain qualitative insight in speaking with our test takers. Our test takers come from all over the world, as we shared, and with many different first languages, backgrounds, and interests. The one thing they have in common is their desire and interest to pursue study at an international university. And user experience has always featured prominently in the test from its development through to its iterations over the years. And user experience kind of is key to what Duolingo English Test is. We want students to have a positive experience. And we often hear from students and test takers, even though it's a high stakes exam, they often walk away having had a positive experience. Two other aspects are accessibility, of course, key to achieving our mission, but something that test takers also recognize as being helpful in achieving their academic goals. And then lastly, this concept of test readiness versus test prep. The Duolingo English Test is really designed to show your real proficiency. And so students understand that to get better and improve in English and to improve in your Duolingo English Test score, it takes practice, both formal and informal practice, nothing you can cram for or memorize. This slide shows data that we recently featured in our blog, where we explore the geographic diversity of our test takers, and I think speaks to the global depth of interest of international study destinations and underpins our mission to provide quality education and be universally acceptable. So countries that host the most test takers, China, India, Brazil, the US, Canada, have hundreds, if not thousands of cities represented in our data, again, demonstrating some of the limitations of relying on a test center approach. And lastly, before we move into hearing how we work with institutions and hearing from institutions directly, I just wanted to do a quick kind of deeper dive into India. As international admission professionals, we know that India has traditionally been a graduate-focused market. And so it's promising to see that as more US institutions begin accepting the Duolingo English Test at the graduate level, we are seeing tremendous growth among prospective graduate students in India. And I think this tells an interesting story of the synergies between test takers and the institutions. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan to speak a bit more about how we work with institutions.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. There was a question that came in, Lindsay, while you were chatting, and I answered through the chat, but I do want to talk to that just for one quick second. So the question was, how many of our institutions are requiring a secondary English test once students get to campus? My answer was less than 10%. There are some that do that, but I think that definitely coincided with the pandemic and it being a new test. And it was just a way to assure that those students had the correct English to be able to, start at whatever level they need to begin at. So I think I've seen less and less of that as time has moved forward. So great question though. So how do we work with institutions? How does an institution sign up? And then what are the steps past that? So we have definitely evolved over the last 5 years. Before you had to reach out to Lindsay or I and actually have to do it all through email. Now we actually have an official form. So we're excited for that. If you're looking to accept the test, it is completely free. You'd fill out the form. Once you do so, you're just going to answer a few questions. And once you're able to do that, we're going to send you back your login credentials and your ability to be able to integrate into Slate or other CRMs, since we have an open API. And of course, we can walk you through that as well. But what this does is give you access to an online dashboard. And so what will happen is when a student takes an exam, they are going to get a certified result, and it's going to come via email. Once that is certified, they're able to go into our share menu and then share that directly to the dashboards that have been set up. And there's no extra cost for the student to do so. And they can do this as many times as they like. So if they have their top 10 or top 5, they actually can just send it to everyone, and there's no additional cost past that $49 fee for the student. Once they click that and actually share, you will get an email saying that there is a new score on your dashboard. And what you're seeing here is a picture of our new dashboard. We did enhance a few features to be able to search and to be able to, put in your cutoff scores and then have those scores that come in, make sure you're only looking at scores that are actually valid and actually meet your minimum requirements. So everything is done securely through our database and systems. We do work fully in China. We have a server in Beijing, so we don't have to worry about the firewall, which is fantastic, but everything is a great backup. So if you do have that Slate import and let's say that goes down or Slate has an issue, you always have the backup of going to our online dashboard and being able to pull scores from there as well. And then processing the results and data. So you log in your dashboard. We talked about Slate integration. Again, that public API, what that means, and I know that's a very techie term, but we are a tech company, just means that our information is open to integrate into any system. So even if you have a very robust system on your campus or a very minimal system, we usually are able to just directly feed those scores into that. So if you're an institution that's already using us, please reach out. We can help you figure that out. Or if you're a brand new institution, of course, we can walk you through those steps as well. And then moving forward into 2022, something that we're very excited about are these new reports on shares. And so, of course, during the pandemic, we've had the ability to collect so much more data than we have in the last 4 years prior to that. And so what we're able to do now is provide more information to our institutions about where their test takers are coming from, maybe some markets that you had no idea that students were interested in you, and you could then focus your recruitment efforts there. Who your competitors are within our network as well. So if you're an institution and you have in mind, your top 5 programs that you're competing against, maybe those have changed with the Duolingo English Test. And then, of course, we're going to break down the scores too to see what kind of scores that you're receiving and what your average score is across the board with students. And for those of you, before I move on, for those of you that are already using the exam, look for these in 2022, and they'll hopefully be coming at the end of every admission cycle, and then means sent out to everyone. So you'll have to be able to look at that. And of course, you can reach out to Lindsay or I if you ever need to take a deeper dive into your data. Then something else that we're really proud of, and I mentioned this past spring as well, but we're always pushing this because it really is important to our mission, is that access program. So the ability to give those high achieving low income students the ability to take the exam completely for free. We've kind of changed the way we've been doing this. Before, once a year, we would ask our institutions if they had any need for this and then give you a coupon. Now we actually have an application for that. So at the bottom of the screen, you see englishtest.duolingo.com/access. And now you can actually walk through the application process to say, I need this many coupons. But it's a fantastic program. We love being able to help students throughout the world. So please utilize this if you have a need for that. Then coinciding with the access program, we're really excited that this just came out last month, was this new position between the Duolingo English Test and the UNHCR. And what this is, it's going to have someone that completely focuses on refugees throughout the world. In the beginning, we're going to focus on a few different regions of the world. And we want to be able to place these refugees within institutions throughout the world. So this is not a US only program. This is going to be a worldwide program. So getting these refugees from all over the world and then placing them within institutions throughout the world. We're really excited to get this up and running, and hopefully it'll be up and running in early 2022. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Lisa at Arizona State so she can talk about her experience with the Duolingo English Test.
Great, thank you, Ryan. All right, next slide, please. All right, so starting off first, I just want to, I really like the way Lindsay and Ryan set this webinar up to give you, two pretty different perspectives. Many of you already know ASU is one of the, if not the largest state university in the country. Just when you're looking at our total student population, we have just under 80,000 students, so technically 75,000 students. across our metropolitan campuses here in the Phoenix area. The other piece is that we have students in California, Washington, and then of course online as well. The big piece that I'll focus on in my presentation piece today is really focused on the grad student experience, because I know that's why many of you are here. But I will highlight some undergrad pieces too, because I do think they're relevant to the grad community. And it's just part of the experience ASU has had with Duolingo thus far. But one piece that I think is kind of the main core reason why ASU started to accept the Duolingo exam comes down to our mission and values. ASU focuses a lot on who we can include in higher education and not who we exclude. So basically we see it as if a student is competitive to a graduate program at ASU, whether it's through test scores or through their academic background or their goals, then there is a degree program that is here for them and that can support them as they're exploring options, career opportunities, transitions, things like that, either, and research opportunities as well. So with that, we have students who come from across the country, of course, but around the world. So currently we have students from about 136 different countries. The majority of our students in graduate programs, specifically in engineering, come from India. And then next following that is followed with China and Taiwan. And then basically from that point, the percentages get smaller and smaller, but we have, we continue to focus in on ensuring students from around the world are familiar with ASU and the opportunities they can find here. So next slide. So starting first of, why did ASU choose to offer the Duolingo as an option? Comes down to the fact that as we're basically checking out different competitors, different opportunities, different resources for students, the number one piece is that we did find Duolingo to be comparable. And I'll say we, meaning our faculty. This was a piece where we really took in the faculty's perspective. The faculty found the scores to be comparable to the TOEFL and IELTS, which are the two more common exams that our students tend to take when they come to ASU. The other piece that we noticed in the beginning, and then we've also noticed even more and more as TOEFL and IELTS have moved to the at-home exam, is the piece related to the integrity of the company and the security features that are in place to make sure that when students are taking the test, we can rest assured that their test environment was secure, that any measures related to cheating or even academic integrity have been put into place and well followed. Those who are monitoring test takers are well trained and prepared to basically ensure that the scores that come to ASU are legit and relevant scores. I will add too that this piece really helped us feel more confident because as other, companies and, say like TOEFL and IELTS, for example, did move to the at-home test, we felt more confident knowing that Duolingo is already running the at-home option and doing it well. The other piece that I'll add is we were attracted to the fact that the results are available rather quickly. This was especially helpful with some of our graduate programs who have very specific, very stringent application deadlines. In these situations where a student perhaps had a TOEFL or an IELTS, or I'll say too, a Duolingo exam that was going to expire, we were able to suggest to the student that they consider doing the Duolingo because those scores would get to us pretty quickly and we could add them to their file before the file went to review in time for the deadline. Many of you probably have the same requirements in place that once that deadline has hit, there is no gray area, like midnight on that date, anything that is not complete or not ready to be reviewed will not be reviewed until the next term. So that really helped with the student experience and delivering more of like a student-centric experience through the graduate admissions process. The other piece that we noticed related to the undergrad students is the fact that Many of our students who were looking at applying for like merit-based scholarships did find that they were able to get the results faster because they would send in a file, and perhaps their file wasn't as competitive as they hoped. So they would take the Duolingo exam, knowing that once again, their scores would get to us right away and they would still meet the scholarship deadlines. Next slide. So basically, as you can see from this timeline here, ASU, we acted rather quickly. But the reason we're confident in our ability to act fast is because we had already been researching Duolingo for quite a while before we actually implemented it and accepted it as one of our options for test takers. But basically, as you can see from this date, February 4th, once we realized that China was no longer going to be offering examinations at test centers because they were closing all of their test centers, and that includes the GRE and the GMAT. I mean, basically everything in China was going to be closed from February, March, and potentially onward. We had no idea what to expect with COVID at that point. So our provost temporarily approved Duolingo at that time and basically said that we'll accept any tests from February through July is what we thought. Originally that was our timeline. We were optimistic that things would be back into place and back to normal again. Shortly after that, we set our test score. And then we basically at that point made sure that our email communications, our websites were updated. Everything included the information about Duolingo as an option. We notified students who already had applications in place but hadn't taken an English proficiency exam. We notified students who perhaps were just still exploring their degree options. Additionally, undergrad parents and high school counselors and anyone who would need to know this information. Basically, a month later, we opened it up to 14 countries. So we extended past China, went to about 14 countries. And then from there is like rapid fire. A week later, we opened it up to 19 countries. And then a week later, we said all global locations are approved. And then we watched it, we monitored it. We watched retention data. We checked in with faculty of some of the programs that saw a high number of students taking the Duolingo exam. And we, in October this year, just a month ago, added Duolingo as a permanent option to the graduate college policy manual, meaning the dean of the grad college at that point had approved it as a permanent option. We, from just some of the research that we were finding, basically saw that with Duolingo scores, competitive students who had a competitive Duolingo score, and actually, Lindsay, if you want to go to the next slide, I can keep talking because this will come up here. But basically, of like 913 students who took the Duolingo exam in fall 2020, about 500 were admitted. And so we basically were able to see that, 500 were denied because the Duolingo score and the GRE and the undergrad GPA all showed that like the competitiveness piece matched. So it made us feel even more confident knowing that these scores were consistent with what we were seeing with TOEFL and IELTS, and once again, GRE, GMAT, and GPA. So ASU set the test policy that we as a university accept a 105 for graduate admission. And then we do have some departments and some degrees that have higher requirements. So for example, the law school has a minimum score of 115. The School of Mass Communication and Journalism set a 120, as did the Department of English. And then on the undergrad side, we did see that engineering set a 105 as their minimum score, and our nursing program set a 100 as an undergrad score. The other piece I will add, because just to share, I know when I was speaking to Ryan and Lindsay and Stevie about it, is that widely, the university itself and all of the departments do accept the Duolingo, but I'm confident that they accept it with knowledge and with research and with, making a sound decision. So much so because even like our business school, for example, does not accept the IELTS, but they do accept the TOEFL. So our faculty are very engaged in deciding which English proficiency exams are accepted. And it's a pretty stringent requirement. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Students cannot get an English proficiency score waiver if they don't meet some of those qualifications that we've listed, like they went to a US institution, for example. But we have a very detailed website that shows how you can get a waiver and how you can't. And you can't just skip English proficiency. It is a very strict requirement at ASU, because our fear is that we put a student in a program and they wouldn't be able to do well, and we want them to actually graduate and go on to a stellar career. So we don't want to set them up for failure. Next slide. And then just to share some of the trends that we saw. So like I said, we rolled this out in spring 2020. So in fall 2020, about 1% of our applicants used a Duolingo. And then by fall 2021, we saw about 8% use them. You can see here's that data I shared like 3 slides ago. But what we have heard from our staff who actually live in India and work closely with Indian students is that the accessibility of the test really truly allowed students to adopt this exam early on. Basically, we saw, especially in India because of the COVID cases there, that if students had the technology access and had a reliable, Wi-Fi connection or and computer system in place, they were able to continue with their application for a graduate program at ASU. Because they could do it from the safety and security of their home, despite the pandemic that was happening around them. So the Duolingo presented that opportunity to them. And the final slide here I just want to share are some of the lessons we learned. And I hope you can use this as information that's helpful for you as well. One of the biggest pieces that we learned, and we are still learning, is ASU is a state university, so our resources are slim. We follow a very slim model on ensuring that we can, create the best, internal processes with a very slim budget. So one of the parts that we have ran into is that we, in the beginning, we would get the test scores in and found that we needed to just manually add them to a student's file. And it was tedious. You saw there were like 900 scores that came in. So every single one of those scores had to be manually added to a student's application before it went to committee review. And that took a lot of time, and we did it through spreadsheets. And we are in the process of trying to create a better system in place. But that's one piece that we are learning from, is just knowing that we needed to put some processes into place to help us internally, process the applications faster without relying on a student to reach out and ask us if their scores were received or not. So that was one of the big pieces that we've been focused on a lot through the last year and a half. And then on the student experience side, my team and I really just once again focused in on encouraging students to do the at-home Duolingo exam because the scores arrive fast, it's reliable, and as long as they have the technology available, they should be able to get it done right away. So we use a lot of our communication to deliver that student-centric message of, like, we are here as admission services to be a resource to our students. So we want to give them the best option so that they can get their scores to us and get their application processed quickly. The final piece is that as a team, when we give our application tips webinars, which we do every other week, or when we host some of our large scale events, we do share resources about like just what they should have in place. So not just saying, take the Duolingo because it's a great option, but asking them those questions like, do you actually have a quiet room in your house where you can separate yourself from your family or from your dog or from your children? Do you have the technology in place where you can take the exam without an interruption to your Wi-Fi? And if they don't, then we encourage them to explore their options before they sit down to take the test, because it's important that they take this test serious. So that is my piece. I hope these lessons learned are helpful. If you have any questions, I'll keep an eye on the Q&A. And then, of course, I'll be here throughout the rest of the webinar.
Great. Well, and I can go ahead and transition over to a smaller institution's perspective to talk about how we at SMU have been using the Duolingo test to make our admissions process more accessible to international students. So as I mentioned earlier, Southern Methodist University, or SMU, is located in Dallas, Texas. We're just north of the downtown area. So pretty much an urban environment for our institution, but if you were on campus, you wouldn't really get that feel. We are a private institution. We have about 12,000 students, a little over 12,000 students total that are enrolled for fall 2021. About 5,400 of those students, a little over, are graduate students, which I think most people are surprised to learn because I think we're mostly known for undergraduate education at this point, but we're hoping to change that. We actually received a very generous donation a few years ago to build up a graduate school, which is where I work, in the Moody School of Graduate and Advanced Studies. And so the idea is that we are investing a lot more into the overall graduate experience for students and for the university as a whole. And we're really invested in research and invested in educational experiences where students can go out and impact our community around us. And of course, make a national and international impact as well. So a lot of what we do is really geared towards how we can best help bring the best and brightest students to SMU so they can really thrive and make an impact with their research and with their scholarship. The Moody School is comprised of the Dedman College of Humanities and Sciences, the Lyle School of Engineering, Meadows School of the Arts, and the Simmons School of Education and Human Development. If you're familiar with SMU at all, you probably know us for the Dedman School of Law and the Cox School of Business, which are two of our professional schools, in addition to the Perkins School of Theology and the Guildhall program, which is for computer game design. Now, those numbers that I'll mention and that I'll talk about aren't really included in this presentation because I focus more on what the Moody Graduate School encompasses, but they are an integral part to that larger graduate school community. So a lot of the things that we do supports those students, but when it comes to admissions and recruitment, we focus a little bit more on these 4 schools that are listed here. So within the Moody School, the graduate population is about a little less than 2,500. 410 of those are international students. So it does seem like a smaller number, but when you look at the PhD population, which is the population I'm directly responsible for supporting in terms of recruitment and admissions, we have about 199 students who are international. So a large population of our PhD student community is international. And we do that because we want to bring in a sense of diversity when it comes to educational perspectives and research perspectives. And it really, we think, enhances what we have to offer as an institution. And especially, our students just bring a breadth of knowledge and experience when they come from different backgrounds instead of being all from the same place. So international recruitment is very important to us because it really helps us diversify what our research output is and what we can bring to the larger scholarly community. Next slide, please. So why did we choose the Duolingo test? Well, I will say we were not as proactive as Lisa. Our admissions process for fall 2020 had actually wrapped up by about February of 2020. Our deadlines usually hit in December and January. So by that point, we had already made all of our major admissions decisions. Some of our applications will have rolling deadlines, so we may accept some applications after the fact. But for the most part, we had a pretty good idea of what our fall 2020 class was going to look like. However, by April 2020, when we realized that the pandemic really wasn't starting to slow down, and if anything, it was just gaining speed as far as closures and things like that, we realized that we probably had to come up with some kind of alternative for accessibility for our students. So in April of 2020, Duolingo actually, I believe, reached out to me first, and I took the call and had a wonderful conversation and got a demonstration of how the test worked. And what really impressed me the most were the security features and just how in depth they took the time to look at all the different aspects of what the at-home testing experience would look like and what, what that student experience would be. So it wasn't so much, just appeasing me as a administrator and looking at the test score and the results end, but also what would the experience be for a student taking that test. And to me, it seemed very accessible in the sense that it wasn't superimposing. It wasn't something that I think students would be uncomfortable by. And I think especially in this day and age, and now we're all very familiar with Zoom and virtual meetings, but at the time it was still a pretty new concept. So I think their approach to the virtual aspect and the digital aspect of test taking was pretty advanced. And I think the security aspects were major strength in us feeling comfortable and confident with moving forward with accepting the test results. And similar to what's already been discussed, I think the key thing was the flexibility. Even though most of our students had already applied to our programs, we did have a few applications that came in, especially master's applications, where students still needed to take a test because they still wanted to pursue their graduate education here. And so we were able to provide Duolingo as an option for those students. And as we got into the fall 2021 application cycle, it was something that we noticed that, even though a lot of students may not have taken it, they were appreciative that they had the option in case, their old TOEFL score was expired, or, if they needed to take it, it was a quick and easy test to access, and then they would be able to provide that score for us if we needed it. Next slide, please. So for our process to accept, it's a little different from ASU's experience. We are currently decentralized. So we do have one central graduate application processing office that receives all of our test scores, like the GRE, the IELTS, the TOEFL exams, and they put them to the applications in Slate. We are a Slate school. However, the process for looking at the applications, making sure they meet standards, all of that is left to the different schools and colleges. So as I mentioned earlier in my introduction, I primarily do the processing for the Dedman College of Humanities and Sciences, but all of our other schools, even within the graduate school or under the umbrella of the graduate school, do process their own applications and have their own processes. So as I mentioned, for us, for Dedman College, we started looking at Duolingo in April of 2020, and we integrated it as an exception. So if students didn't already have existing TOEFL or TOEFL or IELTS scores, we would allow them to do Duolingo as the exception. What we were finding was that a lot of students already had existing scores, so there weren't too many students who needed it for fall 2021. But as we got into the fall 2022 cycle, which is ongoing now, we find that more and more students in some of those areas that Lindsay mentioned earlier with her map, we're needing an option like Duolingo. So we decided to approve it through our graduate directors or graduate program directors and the associate dean of the College of Humanities and Sciences, and we added it as a formal option to our website this year. Similarly, the Lyle School of Engineering, which actually receives most of our international applications, they had approved the option because they were still working through a lot of their applications for fall 2020 at the time COVID hit. And so it was an approved option for fall 2020 admissions, but more in use for fall 2021 admissions. And then formal language was added to their website as well for fall 2022 admissions. I will also mention just one thing is that we did communicate quite a bit with our ESL office, and our ESL director was in a lot of the talks with our deans and associate deans and with our faculty as well to kind of get a sense of how the test compared. And so we did, even though we didn't go through a formal process yet of putting it like in our graduate catalog, we did consult with other university offices just to get their sense of what the students' readiness would be if they took a Duolingo test compared to TOEFL or IELTS. So that was also part of our process before we greenlit any accepting any scores. So thank you, Lindsay. You can go ahead and move on. So using the test and score criteria, again, we use the scale that Duolingo has that compares it to the TOEFL, IELTS, and CEFR test. And our minimum scores for TOEFL and IELTS are listed there. 80 for TOEFL, and IELTS is a 6.5 overall band score. So we did a Duolingo score of 110. What's interesting is that we found that some students felt like that would be a really easy score to hit. And so they were pretty confident that they would be able to go in and get that no problem. But what we found is that it actually is a challenge. It does, this test really does challenge them and test their abilities accurately to see if they can meet that score. So we feel like it has been a pretty accurate score in comparison to the TOEFL and the IELTS. Some of our programs, for example, and I didn't mention them there because our Meadows School of the Arts and Simmons School do not formally accept Duolingo except for in extenuating circumstances. And the Meadows School, I believe their score is 115. So theirs is a little bit higher just because of their language skills are necessary for collaboration and ensembles and things like that. So they have a little bit of a higher score, but we do find that it is a pretty competitive score compared to the other existing exams. For us, because we do use this for PhD recruitment or PhD admissions, a lot of our admissions process is also deciding on funding and who gets what type of funding, if they're getting a teaching assistantship or a research assistantship. So English language proficiency is key to understanding what skills a student has and where they're going to be most successful if we assign them anything. So in addition to Duolingo, we do ask that students prepare a separate video essay, which is done through Slate for our Dedman College students, really just for the PhD applications. And the reason we do this is because a lot of the questions that are asked in the verbal section of the Duolingo exam, while it does effectively assess their ability to speak and listen and understand and comprehend the language, the type of conversational content isn't quite academic. And so for us, it gives us an idea of how a student may respond to a question in a more academic setting, either as a TA or as a research colleague or anything like that. So we do actually have that component, which is in addition to all the other components of the Duolingo exam. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we did do a lot of coordination with our ESL office, and we're still coordinating with them to kind of keep up with students who are currently here who took Duolingo and to see what their process or what their progress has been, and then assess if their skills are still on par with students who came in with TOEFL or IELTS exams. So we're constantly monitoring and measuring to see how effective the Duolingo test is at predicting their success in the classroom. You can go on to the next one, Lindsay. So with Applicant Trends, as I mentioned, we didn't really use it too much for fall 2020s, except for an exception. So overall, with 747 international applications, we had 30 students with eligible Duolingo scores. So I will mention we had students who submitted other scores, but these were the ones that met our benchmark. And from that, we got 12 admits and 6 deposits, which, 6 students that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise because they wouldn't have been able to take the exam. So for us, that was a win. And the other key thing I think to look at when considering Duolingo, and again, going back to Lindsay's point earlier in the presentation, is just that it kind of opened us up to other countries where students may not have had the accessibility to take the TOEFL or IELTS, but they could take this exam very easily and, could complete an application for study in the US. So we saw an increase in students from the countries listed here, in particular, Nigeria, Iran, and Colombia. India, of course, is always a strong volume of applicants, but some of these other countries were a little bit bigger. And similarly, for our spring 2022 applications, you can kind of see a similar trend. And then we had a huge increase in students from Nigeria, but also going back to Lindsay's point, a lot more students from India and especially from cities that weren't as common as before, were starting to apply to our school. So with fall 2022 applications right now, we're starting to see again that diversity of applicants coming from countries that may not normally apply to our institution. So Bangladesh is increasing, of course, Iran, Pakistan, but also Malawi and Thailand. And then we also have an even bigger increase of students from Nigeria as well. So again, this is useful for us because we're broadening our reach to students who may not have been able to apply to us otherwise. And we really do want to bring in those high quality students that come from diverse backgrounds to really bring their perspective to our research community here. Lindsay, if you don't mind. Thank you. So just a quick, because I know we're a little over and I want to give time for questions. The lessons we learned were, again, score adjustments. As I mentioned, we're talking with our ESL office. We're looking at the ways we can assess student success while they're here as students to see if there's any way that we should be adjusting the score or how we're using the Duolingo scores to predict their success in the program. And so, for example, Meadows was one of those programs that increased their score from 110 to 115 because of the way students had to interact with, professors and with other people within their program. And so we're doing the same for PhD. As students are taking on teaching assistantship roles or other types of roles, we want to make sure that they're comfortable and able to effectively communicate what they need to in order to be successful in their program. We haven't really had issues with getting the test results into Slate. What we really haven't taken advantage of is the ability to look at the dashboard, and please correct me, Ryan and Lindsay, because I'm sure my terminology is off, but to basically integrate things like the video essay and some of those other components like their writing sample into the reader component of Slate, where the faculty could actually see all the different components. So for right now, we just import the test scores like we would do for IELTS and TOEFL, just where they could see the overall band score and then the component scores, on a main page of the application, but we're looking into maybe integrating more of that information to see if that would be effective and useful during the review process for our faculty. Right now, we're trying to keep it consistent with what we have from IELTS and TOEFL, just so our faculty don't get too confused trying to figure out what's missing from one if Duolingo has it, but another exam doesn't. But we're looking into that as an option. So that is, I think, a key feature that's if we see that more and more people start taking this exam and submitting results, that might be something we really want to take advantage of. And then finally, just our impact on international recruitment. As I mentioned, we're really seeing an increase in the diversity of our applicants as to where they're coming from, and even within different cities of a certain country too. So we find that very promising. We think that that's an excellent thing to promote. So we're really excited to see where this takes us. And again, we've been very happy with the Duolingo experience so far. And I think our next steps are to, again, assess the success of our students and then see if this is something that we can move into a more permanent option for our SMU students.
Great. Thank you so much, Stevie and Lisa, for sharing your perspective from kind of adoption to success. A lot of the conversation in the chat and in the Q&A centers around success of students, right? Which is our number one goal, to support students in their academic journeys to successful graduation and career. Lisa, you mentioned that you are using retention data. And again, it's still a fairly early test, right? But we do encourage institutions to do internal validity research. Do you want to just touch on a bit, Lisa or Stevie, about how you plan to, or how you are currently working on assessing kind of retention and success in relation to those students who submit a Duolingo English test?
Sure. Yeah, I can. I'll go first. And so we have a dashboard different than the Duolingo dashboard, where we basically are able to pull either retention data or new enrollment and admissions data on the retention side through Tableau and some really fancy graphs and charts and things like that our tech team created. We've basically just been able to start to assess the students who took Duolingo, if they continued on to a future term. If my department ever needed to see GPA information, we could have that pulled as well. For admission services, our purpose is just to see if they are continuing on from one term to the next. But the actual departments or colleges at ASU have access to pull similar reports, but where they can actually dig in and see how the students performed in their semester. So like what their first semester GPA was at ASU. But for our main purpose, we were pulling data to see who was a new student who continued on from the first term to the next. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yeah, similarly, because our students would have just started, this would be their first term. We try to get midterm feedback from the faculty since ours is just a handful of students. So we kind of do it by, just reaching out to that department and getting feedback. But I think the idea is, to see what retention is like throughout the program, and then just seeing what their GPA and grade point average will be once they go from term to term, and then compare that with other international students and with kind of what our median and base scores have been with the TOEFL and IELTS. So that's the plan for assessment. And then again, connecting with our ESL office to see if they've gotten any questions from students or from faculty about, if students have taken advantage of any of the resources we offer them, or how they've been interacting with that office as well.
Great, thank you. And I will note, one of the things that has grown tremendously within Duolingo over the last year is our assessment research team, adding new assessment researchers on a regular basis to ensure that we are able to support validity and outreach efforts. And again, as the technology advances, our test does as well. And so if anyone has questions and wants a deeper dive into some of the validity and outreach, Ryan or I would be happy to connect you with some of our colleagues as well. See, I think we don't have any other questions, but I do want to make sure I have up on the screen Ryan and my contact information. We would love, I know there are some connections being made currently. If you do want to learn more, Ryan and I are happy to speak with you offline after this webinar. If you'd like to learn more about Stevie or Lisa's experience, I'm sure they'd be happy to kind of chat offline as well to dive a bit deeper if you have additional questions. Guys, I think we did really well on time. Tracy, we are 1 minute under.
Yes, you are. And you didn't lose too many people there that had to run off to meetings either. So I think you guys did great. Lots of great information. I know I was emailing my team while you guys were talking, and everybody was giving their suggestions and proactive tips. And you guys answered a lot of questions there. I do want to point out that Ryan did put in our chat the official guide for test takers, I believe it was called. So for those who might be watching this in the recording, I'm going to just throw this out there, and I'm sure Ryan will be okay with it. Email Ryan from that last slide and ask for that guide, unless it's on the website. Maybe it's there as well. So Lindsay, Ryan, do you have thoughts on that?
It's in both places, but happy to, if they email me, I'm happy to send it along as well.
Okay, so if you are watching this recording, check out that last slide, email Ryan. It's the official guide for test takers. He threw it in the chat, so those who are watching live were able to download that. If you are still on and you haven't downloaded it from the chat, feel free to go ahead and do that before we close out this webinar. So that way you can send that out to your teams and hopefully share it, because I know that's definitely valuable information. I downloaded it as soon as it came through the chat. So Duolingo, Lisa, Stevie, thank you so much for your perspectives. It's super valuable when we have NAGAP members or other institutions giving us feedback on how you've used these types of initiatives that for our graduate students and really helping to grow the graduate enrollment everywhere. And I know we all have a lot of questions. So Ryan, Lindsay, thanks for doing these webinars for us, because there's a lot of talk right now in the graduate world about some various options for students and applicants so we can all grow our enrollment. So I know we all greatly appreciate it. So since we're at the top of the hour, I am going to close out, but thank you all from Duolingo again for sponsoring this and being a part of NAGAP. We really appreciate it. So happy end of November and welcome December tomorrow, you all. Thank you.
Happy holidays. Thanks, everyone.